For we contend not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spiritual host of wickedness in the heavenly places. From the American Midwest comes This Present Darkness, where we explore the supernatural aspects of the paranormal from a Catholic perspective and expose the dark forces in our world and beyond, both seen and unseen. Now, here's your host, historian, paranormal investigator, author, and ghost lorist, Ursula Bielski.
Hey everyone, this is Ursula Bielski. Welcome to This Present Darkness. Thanks so much for being here. Those of you who are new to the show, I really welcome you. We look at everything supernatural from a Catholic perspective. And tonight, I'm going to say for my old friends in the ghost hunting world, if you don't already hate me, you're going to probably hate me after this show, but I hope you'll give me a chance to explain what I'm talking about tonight and what we're going to discuss on this episode, because tonight we are talking about ghost hunting tools, ghost hunting equipment. It is one of the biggest industries in the 21st century. There was a boom of interest in ghost hunting tools and equipment in the past 20 years. And we're going to talk about how that all happened and when it started to happen and how things have changed in the world of ghost hunting since I got started out some 35 years ago now, and what the key difference is in the methodology of paranormal investigation, which has taken it from an at least pseudoscientific pursuit to something that is absolutely unabashedly occult in most cases. And I hope tonight I'm going to help you understand why using a lot of the very popular ghost hunting tools is not only dangerous to your soul and to your mental health and physical health, but also just kind of pointless and doesn't really do anything except maybe provide some thrills. It doesn't really help you to determine anything in your investigations, and it doesn't really help to establish anything or even really help the people that you're there, hopefully, to help. So we're going to talk about all of that. Now, you've often heard me tell in the past, if you've been with me for a while, now, like I said, Chicago Haunts, my first book, was published in 1997. And I had been doing paranormal investigation for at least a decade before that. And those of you who have been with me a long time, since my earliest books, you know that when I started out doing paranormal investigation and writing about ghosts and hauntings and the paranormal, it was for, I had a mission, and the mission was to give people someone to talk to, an outlet where they could talk to me and I would understand the experiences that they had had with ghosts and hauntings. And I wouldn't laugh at them. I wouldn't think they were crazy. That I knew that this was something legitimate, that I assured them that many, many people had these kinds of experiences. And I hoped that in the work that I did and the ear that I gave to people and the writing that I have done over the years, I had hoped to lead people to a belief in the paranormal and ultimately, of course, a belief in God. And that was my mission. That was my goal. And somewhere along the way, I lost that mission. I lost that goal, and I got dragged into the occult dimension of modern ghost hunting to the detriment of myself and many people that I led down that road as well. And thank God I got out of that aspect of paranormal investigation. And thank God I did what I'm going to advise you to do tonight, which is literally smash and burn your occult ghost hunting tools. And we're going to talk about how to distinguish what those are and why we should do that. So let me go back, just for a second. Let's just put this in perspective. I was one of the voices for many years, a Catholic voice, a Christian voice. I actually did talks on this. I wrote blogs about this. I put it in my books. that there's nothing in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that prevents us from ghost hunting. That, we are to believe in life after death. It's an integral, perhaps the integral aspect of our faith. And anything that helps us to believe in that, solidify that belief is good. And the Catechism doesn't say anything about ghost hunting. Well, that's not exactly true. The Catechism says, what we all know about what the church, the Christian church, and the Christian scriptures say about mediumships and consulting mediumship, consulting the dead, consulting mediums to help us make decisions, to look into the future, etc. And myself and a lot of other Christian ghost hunters, and including Catholic ghost hunters like me, we kind of like took that apart. I'd like to take that apart and say the Bible only cautions us against and forbids us from consulting mediums, consulting the dead, to find out about our future, right? But the Bible says, do not go for advice to people who consult the spirits of the dead. If you do, you will be unclean and an abomination. I am the Lord your God. So the Bible is saying, do not consult mediums, do not consult the dead, basically to ask for advice or to ask about the future. And so, yeah, myself and others, and there's a lot of other Christians who are still doing this, we'd say, oh, well, I'm not asking the dead for advice. I'm not asking the dead, what's going to happen in the future. I'm just trying to talk to the spirits and see if I can help them, see why they're haunting this place, see why they're hanging around, see if there's anything that can be done to help put them to rest. So this is how I would justify it. I would also justify it in saying that I was doing scientific research. I wasn't doing this for fun. I wasn't doing this because it was like my religion. I was doing it in the interest of science, and I was trying to find out information or collect some evidence, oh, holy evidence for the paranormal, for the afterlife, for survival of the soul after bodily death. But you know what? That's just BS. It's not a fine line that separates acceptable paranormal investigation from blasphemy and outright sin. It's a big, fat, bold line, and it's right there in the scripture. We are not to talk to the dead, period. That's what the Bible says. And yet, and now I've gotten to the point where I realize that so intensely that I even tell people, if your mom passes away and you miss her, don't talk to her. Don't walk around the house talking to her. Oh, mom, I miss you. I wish you were still here. No, because something will answer. Your mom's not going to answer you. You may think she answers you when you start hearing stuff banging around or knocking in the walls, or maybe even a disembodied voice or some sort of a visual apparition. But as my good friend Ralph Sarchi says, that is not your mother. It's not your mother. It is something else impersonating your mother. And that is what is at the heart of the danger of using so many of the ghost hunting tools that are so prevalent today out there, and that are used literally like toys by so many people that have absolutely no idea what they're dealing with. Now, I named this podcast The Devil's Toy Box. And that's kind of implying, that these toys, these paranormal tools that we all buy, the way some people buy cars and electronics and stuff like that, we buy ghost hunting tools, and these are our toys, quote unquote, our adult toys. And this really is the devil's toy box that we are talking about, because these are tools that the devil uses to get us roped into communicating with him and his minions. And then we are pulled down that dark and dreary and disastrous road to perdition. So let's talk about that for a few minutes, how these things have happened, because the devil's toy box is also a piece of ghost hunting equipment that is sort of like a DIY ghost hunting tool that I started using some years ago. And a good friend of mine who has a gift of mediumship, absolutely. I wish she wouldn't use it, But she got very into using this tool because, as I did, because it was so and is so useful. And there's a lot of activity that comes up when you use it. It is called the Devil's Toy Box. And I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes. I'm going to go through all the different ghost hunting tools that are used these days. And we're going to talk about if they're okay to use in our paranormal investigations, or if they are absolutely not okay to use, or if there are certain ways that you can use them that are all right and others that are not. So the Devil's Toy Box is both all the tools, and it's also a very specific tool. And we'll talk about that in the second part of our program. But I want to go back and talk about how different things are today than from they were when I started ghost hunting and paranormal investigation in the 1980s. I got into ghost hunting when I was an undergraduate at Benedictine University in Lisle and outside of Chicago. And I was a history major. I was studying the history of religion in the United States, mostly, also the history of parapsychology, because that was something that I had always been interested in. And I was very fortunate to have met this young man named James Horan, who was a psychology major. But the school, and this is very interesting back then because this was a Catholic university, the school was allowing him to focus his studies on parapsychology. And so he was conducting parapsychological experiments in EVP, remote viewing, telekinesis, and things like that. And then he was also doing field research in parapsychology, which is, of course, investigating ghosts and hauntings and other what we call spontaneous phenomena. These are things that happen, outside of our own minds. They happen spontaneously. They're not part of this experimental world of laboratory work in parapsychology. And so this was so fascinating to me when I found out that Jim was doing this kind of work, because again, it was something that I had always been interested in. But I didn't really even realize at that time that this was a field of study. I never really knew that parapsychology was something that people studied in school, or that up until the 1970s, parapsychology was something that people studied at the university. And that by the time I got interested in it, it had mostly disappeared from colleges and universities around the world. And there were no programs left in the United States and only a couple abroad. So I also found out later on that Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago, here in Chicago, where I would go on to do my graduate studies in history, was one of the last places that had a parapsychology program. And so I was fortunate in all of the work that I did in grad school in the history of religion and spirituality in the United States, that they still had all of these subscriptions to the old parapsychology journals in the library. So I got to really learn a lot about parapsychology and that era before the internet, that I never would have been able to learn if I had gone to a school that didn't have those resources. So that was very cool. So when I started out at being friends with Jim, he saw how excited I was about his field of study, and he invited me to help him on some of the work that he was doing. So he taught me how to test people for ESP and telekinesis and things like that. And then he also allowed me to come along and assist in research that he was doing at ostensibly haunted places. So the very first investigation that I ever was a part of was on Easter Sunday night in 1988. We investigated the Red Lion Pub here in Chicago, very famous old haunted site on Lincoln Avenue in the Lakeview, Lincoln Park area. And that was the very, very first time that I experienced, what is now known as ghost hunting. But this was this was field research and parapsychology. We were looking into these reported ghosts and hauntings at this location. And after that first night, I was hooked. And I went on to assist Jim in the next couple of years that we were at school in investigating the Country House restaurant in Clarendon Hills outside of Chicago, another very famous haunted location in the area. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, where we conducted photography experiments over several years. And that research was published in the Journal of Perceptual and Motor Skills later on. So that was very cool. I got to be part of some of these journal articles over the past years. And all during that time is interesting to me because as someone who came into an interest in parapsychology because of the experiences that I had had with the things in our house growing up, and then learning about so many other people that had similar experiences. As a historian and as a sociologist, a social scientist, what really struck me was the impact that these experiences had on people. And so it wasn't the scientific aspect of it. It wasn't the evidence that could be collected. It was the impact that the phenomenology had on people. It was the phenomenology of the experiences and the reality of that for people. I saw people who had their entire perception of religion or the nature of the universe changed because of experiences that they had with ghosts and hauntings and other paranormal experiences. And so it's perplexing to me as I assisted Jim in his research, field research, that oftentimes we would find that there was no evidence, hard evidence that there was anything that you might call paranormal going on at a location. So using different tools, and I'll talk about those in a minute, we would collect data from the locations. We would spend a lot of time at the locations, but it wasn't what people had experienced at the locations that mattered. It was the evidence that we could collect, the hard evidence. And so the experiences that people have were really just kind of like breadcrumbs, for us to know what to look for, to know what to record for, to know what to set up our equipment to try and detect. They didn't really have any value for us as scientific researchers. So it's very disturbing to me. And I mean, it was really disturbing to me at a number of these locations where I had interviewed people prior to the investigations and talked to people that were so adamant about what they had experienced. They were so passionate about it, about these experiences. And they really communicated to me how these experiences had affected them so deeply on the deepest, spiritual and emotional levels. And yet at the end of the research, we had to say, oh, no evidence of any paranormal activity. No evidence of a haunting, no evidence of ghosts, no evidence of anything, right? And it really broke me up. It really broke me up because I felt we were dismissing these experiences that people were having. And so at that time in my life, before I even graduated from undergraduate school, I kind of broke off intellectually and academically with my friend Jim was doing. And we were doing two very different things. Jim is a very accomplished parapsychologist today. He has written hundreds of journal articles in parapsychology, teaches in parapsychology. I think he just got the editorship of a prominent parapsychology journal. So a very different path, And I've worked with him over the years on other articles, and even, the other researchers that were working on the same articles, I got into tangles with some of them because they obviously have no belief in the paranormal or the supernatural. And it's very difficult to work together sometimes, most of the time, I think, when you're so at odds in a field like this. Or in this field. I guess there's only one field like this. At any rate, my point is that at that time in the 1980s, when I was first getting involved in paranormal research, paranormal investigation, investigation into what we call anomalous phenomena or exceptional human experience, there was but in the way that I was doing it, and in kind of the people that I was working with, there was no occult involved. There was nothing occult involved in it. There was nothing occult that was used in the research. Now, that's not to say that this wasn't happening. I mean, years before, there had been like Harry Price, the great English paranormal investigator, like the first quote unquote ghost hunter, who would actually he would put together these like ghost hunting tools. Like he built this ghost hunting cage where he took a cage and he put like a bell inside and I think a harmonica and some other things inside. And he would use these in ghost hunting and tell the spirits to, ring the bell or things like that if they were around. So this was kind of the first guy that used ghost hunting tools and actually built ghost hunting tools, but he would also employ mediums at times when he was going ghost hunting and ask the mediums if they sensed any spirits at the locations. And this was something that was really kind of a method that was perfected by the great Hans Holzer, the American paranormal investigator who worked on so many thousands of cases over the years. And I think people my age, this is how we got interested in ghost hunting, was by reading the many books that Hans Holzer wrote, not only for adults, but also for young people as well. I know I remember there are many Hans Holzer books among the armloads of ghost books that I would, paranormal books that I'd bring home when I was a kid. But the Holzer method that he perfected was this method of two investigators going into a haunted location, one with a scientific mindset and scientific tools, and the other being a psychic medium or a clairvoyant that would come in and pick up with these occult means, pick up any spiritual realities from the location. So this was a popular method. This was something that people knew about. And this was also a method that employed by the Warrens later on. But what I was doing when I got started was not this. I was a very Catholic person, a very spiritual person, but that was completely divorced from what I was doing as a paranormal investigator. And I didn't think about that at all. They were such different worlds, and there was none of that was involved in what I was doing. So I never had a question of like, is this spiritually okay for me to be doing this? Because it was so not spiritual. It was so not occult. It was totally scientific. And I'll tell you more about that in just a minute and describe to you what the setup was like. There was an incident though that it was a little red flag that, just hung there in a minute for my mind, and then it was gone. And I didn't think about it really anymore for a long time. And that was that the advisor, of course, my friend, Jim, he had an academic advisor that's volunteered to be his advisor in this strange, parapsychology degree that he was sort of inventing for himself to complete because there wasn't one at our school, right? So the advisor, like most of the instructors at the school at that time, most of the professors at Benedictine at that time were devout Catholics. And I remember the investigation that we did at the country house. This professor left after that investigation because something happened. I think there was a whisk broom that flew off the table during the investigation. And I know he had his rosary with him. And after that, he did not want to be involved in any of these investigations anymore. And again, it just struck me as kind of odd because it just didn't seem to me that, spirituality or demonic things were involved in what we were doing. And what we were doing, again, was very scientific. The tools that we used were scientific tools. We used ordinary things that, of course, that you would use to just make a record of what you were doing. So we had video cameras set up. We had tape recorders set up. But these tape recorders weren't set up to try and communicate with spirits. We weren't going to put on the tape recorders and try to talk and have conversations with whatever spirits were there. They were to record what was going on. So if there were any noises, it would pick those up. It would know, if we had heard the noises, because we would say, did you hear that? Or that was a knock that nobody made. Those are footsteps that no one's making. So it was to record any audio phenomena that, so that we would have a record of it. And at the time that it happened, and that we would know that none of us had, or anyone in, physical had made the sound. Same thing with the video. We also had, we would use a tri-field meter, as some of you involved in paranormal investigation who are used to using EM meters, K2 meters, and other electromagnetic field meters. we would use a tri-field meter sometimes, where this would measure the level of the EM field and the electrical fields, the magnetic fields and such. And so sometimes this would alert us to changes in that field or spikes in the energy field that might indicate that there was something ostensibly paranormal going on. So we would sometimes use those. I remember sometimes Jim would be able to get his hand on a parabolic microphone and bring it to an investigation. This is a very highly sensitive microphone. It has like a big dish, and you kind of pick up it's kind of like a satellite dish, but you walk around with it, and there's an earpiece so you can listen to, sounds that may be out of the reach of what our ears can pick up in real, normally. And there were other things too. There were different kinds of EM meters. There were different kinds of, seismographs, things like that, light meters. But these were all things that just measure the environment, changes the environment. And a good group, some of my good friends, including Jim, Tim Hart, Mike Hollinshead, they actually created a system that was based in a laptop software program. And the acronym is MESA, which stood for multi electromagnetic sensor array. I think that's it. And they still use it today in their investigations. But again, very scientific. Basically, what the MESA does, it's a laptop and it's a software program that has you have a bunch of different sensors, like 8 or 12 sensors hooked up into the software. And the sensors are all hooked up to different monitoring equipment, like light meters and EMF meters, tri-field meters, whatever. And so it's this system that's kind of like an alarm system. So when a combination of these alarms goes off in these different sensors, it's going to give you a good indication, or at least a better indication, that there's something paranormal that's going on, because it's not normal that these differences should be happening at the same time. So I know I'm not a scientific talking person, but I hope you can understand sort of what that means. So it's just kind of like, it lets you monitor when more than one weird thing seems to be happening at the same time, if that makes sense. So again, I got a chance to be exposed to this at a bunch of different investigations, because after I graduated and Jim graduated, we were in the same year. We graduated from Benedictine University and we went our separate ways. He went to grad school downstate, and I went to grad school here in Chicago. And we continued to sometimes investigate together, but we also continued to do our own thing. And I started to write my supernatural folklore, my ghost lore, and do that kind of work as he continued to do this academic parapsychology. But again, all of this was up until the late 1990s. This was all very scientific. And it wasn't until the explosion of these ghost hunting shows just after 2000 that things drastically changed as far as the nature and methodology and object of most popular paranormal investigation. And most people think this started with the show Ghost Hunters, but it didn't. It actually started with the show Most Haunted, the British show Most Haunted, which involved mediumship at these ostensibly haunted locations. And this is where we first saw, the green infrared cameras and all of that. Is anybody here? Can you talk to us? Can you tell us your name? This was where all of that started to really get a huge, huge explosion of interest. And that was right after 2000. Then, and of course, the television show from America, Ghost Hunters, that just rocketed this whole thing out of the park, and everything that followed. When I first started out as a writer in the field of paranormal research, and I started writing my books, there were no books about, local paranormal investigation, they're called regional true ghost stories. And I was one of the only people that was doing that kind of work, that was writing regional true ghost lore, where I was talking to people about their paranormal experiences and recording them, writing them down as history. And, of course, there were people who were writing in parapsychology, just completely true, like journalistic books, like Rosemary Guiley, for example, who was writing, encyclopedia after encyclopedia of kind of manuals about paranormal phenomena, things like that. But the ghost lore, the regional true ghost stories, that was something that wasn't really being done very much, except by people like Chris in Ohio, can't remember her last name, and some other really good people that I had started out by that time in the 1990s, mid 1990s, early 1990s. I had a good career here in Chicago as a writer. I was, the sort of local celebrity. Everyone knew who I was here in Chicago. I was the ghost lady. I was the ghost hunter. And it was enough for me to interview people about their experiences with the paranormal at these locations. It was enough for me to go in with the tools that I now took with me, my little tape recorder that I used like we had originally used it back in the 80s, to make a record of what was happening, make a record of any sounds that were made, make a record of, any voices that came up that we didn't hear in real time. But I wasn't using a tape recorder to try and communicate with anyone. I wasn't bringing in mediums to help me communicate, or psychics or clairvoyants. And we'll go on and talk more about these different tools. But later, as this field exploded, at the beginning, I was involved in it. And in the beginning, I was invited to, when people started to have these paranormal conferences and things, I would be invited to them because I was one of the only people that was doing this kind of work publicly. And so I was, still kind of a celebrity when I started out, especially I was one of the only women that was doing it. But there were a lot of things that happened to me in the course of that as I got to be more famous outside of Chicago. And a lot of it had to do with the usual, the usual old Me Too thing, right? Where I was being propositioned by a lot of these ghost hunter guys that I was meeting at these conventions and doing television shows and stuff like that. A lot of propositioning. There was a lot of stuff like that going on, a lot of sexual stuff going on, a lot of affairs going on outside of marriages. And it was bad. It was really bad. And I'm glad that, at some point I stopped really being a part of it, and people stopped seeing me as part of that whole crowd. And I think the word got around that, I was telling people, like, I went to do this TV show and the producer told me I had to sleep with him, kind of as a thank you for having me on the show. Or I went to this conference and so, married guy wanted to sleep with me. And, I got all involved in that stuff. And I think when I started to talk about it later, because I didn't at first I was completely swept up in it. It was so glamorous and romantic. And, I was divorced, and I, didn't really realize as a Catholic, I wasn't practicing my Catholic faith at that time. So I got totally wrapped up in all this drama and romance and intrigue and glamour of this whole thing. And the Ghost Hunters show, if you remember, to the original cast, Donna Delacroix, she had a lot of health issues, and she left the show originally. The production company reached out to me. It was a Thursday, and they said, we would like you to replace Donna on the show. And I was like, oh my Lord. And I had just gotten divorced. It was 2008 in the springtime, I believe. And I had just gotten divorced. My daughters were little at the time, and in good conscience, I couldn't leave them. I couldn't leave them at home anyway. On top of it, that their father and I had just gotten divorced. I couldn't do it. And they wanted me to be in Romania on Monday, and this was Thursday, and they were going to get me a rush passport renewal and, everything that I needed, get the plane tickets and everything. And I just said, I can't do it. And they were so mad at me because I originally said, okay, I'll try to make it work. And then I thought about it for a few hours and I said, I can't do it. And I remember I called up my mom and I said, Mom, my ship just came in and I can't get on it. And she, of course, she knew that I had done the right thing. And I knew I had done the right thing too. And today I'm so grateful. That was my guardian angel for sure, screaming in my ear, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I often think about, though, how different my life would have been. I see all these, glamorous women that have come out of that whole scene who have been on these ghost hunting shows. And people ask me, how come you never were on one of these shows? How come you've never been on one of these shows? And I just say, I almost was. But, I'm not part of that crowd at all. And I realize now it's a good thing. And now that I kind of want to tell people my own experience and caution them about it, I think there's kind of like a silent sort of ban also. Because nobody really, I think, wants to hear what I have to say. At least not yet, but maybe down the road when they have some of their own experiences, they will. So that's what happened. I started to get sucked into this occult aspect of ghost hunting because I wanted to be a part of the world. I wanted to be part of the TV world. I wanted to be a part of all that. People that were coming on our tours in Chicago, the Chicago haunting tours, they wanted us to have ghost hunting tools on the tours. They wanted to have ghost boxes and dowsing rods and EMF meters, K2 meters. They saw all of this stuff on television and they wanted to do it. So, this was before I saw the truth about all of this. I was like, great, let's do ghost hunting on the tours. And we started to do actual ghost hunting tours where it was just for that purpose, come on the tour and learn how to use ghost hunting equipment at these haunted places. And then we started to incorporate those into the tours we were doing every day. So that was just a standard part of our tours. And that's what everyone wanted. So that gave us a leg up on all the other tours that were developing around us. I started to do trips outside of Chicago to Las Vegas, New Orleans, Salem, that were ghost hunting tours, where part of the itinerary was to go to a haunted place as a group and to ghost hunt with ghost hunting tools. And we would do this, and we did this at a voodoo queen's house in New Orleans. We took in ghost hunting tools and tried to communicate with spirits. We went to a ghost town outside of Las Vegas and did the same thing. Places in Salem. I was crazy, foolish, awful, stupid things for us to do. Places where there had been terrible murders and tragedies that happened, that we were deliberately opening up these doorways at these locations. And again, I've said it 100 times already, but for anybody who hasn't heard it, I am sorry. I was wrong. I was wrong to do it. I was wrong to bring you into it. I am sorry. And I take full responsibility for harm that this did to you. And I know that God has forgiven me. I have repented. I have confessed and received absolution. And I am sorry. So I am trying, this is part of what I'm trying to do to make things right, to try to prevent these dangers from coming to other people. But I got sucked into that. I thought, if I want to be a part of this world, I have to do these things. And I stepped up to the plate and I did them. And I was good at ghost hunting with these tools. I was especially good at EVP research, electronic voice phenomenon. Electronic voice phenomenon is this field or method of paranormal research where you use electronic equipment to try and communicate with spirits. So telephones, cell phones, radios, televisions, and tape recorders. And this actually has a long history in the history of parapsychology. And I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the history of EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, or instrumental transcommunication, as the umbrella of the research is called. When we come back from a break, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of trying to communicate directly with the dead in real time. And then I'm going to tell you, then we're going to go through all of the different tools that people use for this purpose. And we're going to talk about which ones are okay to use, which ones are definitely not okay to use in ghost hunting, and then what ghost hunting tools are can be used in the right way. So we're going to talk all about that when we come back after the break.
Woo! All right. Well, I've been down so long that my mind can't get no rest. No, no. I've been down so long that my mind can't get no rest. No, no. This ain't easy, darling, 'cause the devil's on my trail. I've been running so long that my feet don't work no more. Oh yeah. I've been running so long that my feet don't work no more. Oh no. It ain't easy, darling.
And we are back. Hey, everyone. This is Ursula Bielski. Thanks so much for being on the show with me tonight, where we are talking about the devil's toy box and all of the ghost hunting tools that you should smash and burn tonight after the show. And I'm telling you why. We have already talked about a little bit of the history of the change in the activity of paranormal investigation, popularly from a scientific one to a very occult oriented one. And we have already talked about my own experience with that, kind of getting sucked into this occult world of ghost hunting after my early beginnings as a scientific investigator into ghosts and hauntings. And I want to talk just a little bit about the history of the attempts, the modern attempts to communicate directly with the dead in real time. Of course, the spiritualist movement, which started in the 1840s, was the beginning of the modern attempts towards spirit communication. And this started with seances, rapping on tables and table tipping and things like that. And it grew with the advent of the ability to record voices. It grew into what it is today, because people, of course, naturally, who were trying to establish the truth of communication with the dead and the reality and truth of the afterlife, thought using modern technology would be a great way to do that. If we could record voices that were heard during seances, how much better would that be to plead the cause that there is life after death and these spirits really do return to interact with us. So this progress throughout the 20th century, and Harry Price was instrumental in it, no pun intended, as we already talked about, in starting to bring sort of these scientific implements and instruments into the study of ghosts and hauntings. Then later on, it was an American named Attila von Saleh who started to use audio recording as part of his practice of trying to photograph ghosts. And he felt that using audio, trying to use a photograph record to record what was going on in the environment seemed to be helpful to him. And he would get better results when he employed this kind of methodology. Later on, really, this all exploded with a man named Frederick Jurgensen. And Jurgensen was Swedish, and he was out recording bird calls one day. He loved birds, and he was out in the field recording bird calls. And when he was playing back some of the recordings, he discovered that there seemed to be voices on the tape. And as he continued to make recordings, he found that one of the voices seemed to be the voice actually of his deceased wife. He continued to make thousands of recordings. And Jurgensen, I found out later, was, I think, a cousin of the current Pope at that time. And that was why myself and a bunch of other people went on to write about how the Vatican approved EVP research, because apparently the Pope was supportive of his cousin's work. And at least according to reports, went on record, or at least someone at the Vatican went on record saying that there was no harm in trying to record these voices because it was just scientific. And it was just something that, as scientific minded people, that we could try to understand what it was. I don't know how much truth anymore there was to any of that, now that I know that there's all kinds of weird things going on in the Vatican and all sorts of heretical things that the Vatican has been saying about our relationship with the paranormal. I don't know what to think anymore, but I did have the article about the Vatican and EVP on the Chicago Hauntings blog, and I asked the current owner of the company to take the blog down last week, because I'm horrified now by that blog that so many people read that said, the Catholic Church is totally fine with trying to talk to the dead and record EVP. So it's not okay. I mean, the church might be okay with it, but it's wrong. They shouldn't be okay with it. The Vatican might have approved it, but it's against the catechism of the church. It's against scripture. Don't do it. Anyway, that's what we're talking about tonight. So after Jurgensen, a colleague of his is the guy who just really became synonymous with the study of EVP. And that was Konstantin Raudeve, who is from Latvia. And he went on to write a book called Breakthrough, an amazing experiment in electronic communication with the dead. Now, Konstantin Raudeve is a very interesting character, because not only did he recorded something like 200,000 voices, using all different methods over the years, but he became this larger than life figure after his death, because he has appeared in so many weird occult situations over the years. And it just goes on and on. Like, every time I think Konstantin Raudeve cannot possibly come up in my research anymore in any different circumstance, he does. Everybody who's interested in the study of EVP knows, for example, that in the research that was done in the 1980s and 1990s in Europe by friends of Mark Macy, the American EVP researcher that a lot of you old timers like me probably know. He spoke at our Ghost conference in Chicago, I think in 2007. That's when I got started in EVP, after I listened to Mark Macy talk and I learned about his methodology. Konstantin Raudeve made phone calls to Mark Macy after Raudeve was dead. Allegedly, he came through on spirit communications through televisions, through radios, phone calls, more phone calls, etc. Just doing all my UFO research lately. Can you believe this? Whitley Strieber, the guy who wrote Communion, who was supposedly abducted by aliens in upstate New York many years ago, and he wrote the hugely best-selling book Communion, and apparently had an alien implanted in, I think, behind his ear. I read recently that he said that his implant was designed by Konstantin Raudeve in the afterlife. So apparently Konstantin Raudeve is where the ghost of Konstantin Raudeve is working with aliens to design implants for humans. So yeah, big character in the whole study of the paranormal, ghosts and hauntings, UFOs even. So Konstantin Raudeve, crazy stuff. At any rate, this was how EVP got to be so popular, through the work of Konstantin Raudeve. There was even a record of some of his recordings that was made into a dance single back in the day as well. And I think a lot of people heard this also. But this was the activity that became so popular, actually using a tape recorder primarily, sometimes reel-to-reel tape recorders, and then later on televisions, and even hard drives as computers. I know people who make a habit of writing messages and emails to people who have died hoping that they'll write back. And some people have been successful in doing this, or they'll start a document on Word and, write a message in a Word document and then shut it down. And then they'll check it from time to time. And sometimes they claim someone has written back, inside on the hard drive of their computer. So these are the methods of the umbrella of instrumental transcommunication, which is using any kind of electronic device to communicate with the dead. And EVP is electronic voice phenomenon that's specifically trying to record, preferably real-time conversations with the dead. I mean, it's any kind of EVP, but what happens usually is that you will have the recorder on, whether you're using a digital recorder, reel-to-reel, magnetic recorder, whatever, you'll have it on and you'll start talking to whatever spirits might be there. Is there anyone here with me? Hello, can you say your name? Can you say my name? Who are you? What are you doing here? Is there anything I can do for you? Can I help you? And then when you don't hear any answers in real time, but when you play back the recording, oftentimes you can hear what seem to be like voices answering you. So that's what EVP is. And I got very good at this. And a lot of people would come to me for advice on how to record EVP because I got such great voices. But I think what happened with me was that I think I was spending a lot of time with mediums. And I found that when I was around mediums and I was recording, I had a lot better luck with recording. And mediums will tell you that they are like batteries. And I would call, like my friend Colleen, I always say, you're the battery. And another friend like that, Michael, too. Whenever they were around and I was recording EVP, it would be the voices would come so strong. It seemed like the voices could talk longer, say more words, string more words together than just like one or two syllables. They were clearer and so forth. And I don't know what that's all about, but it's not a good thing as I thought it was. But at any rate, I got really good at it. And which I'm going to talk about at the very end of this. But let's just talk for a few minutes now about the different kinds of equipment that people use in ghost hunting today. And, what's okay to use, because let me say right now, I don't even know if I said this at the beginning. People say like, well, why are you ghost hunting at all? Why are you doing paranormal investigation at all? If it's so dangerous. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, my original mission, that these experiences that we have with the paranormal, with what we call ghosts and hauntings and even the demonic and all of this can lead people to a belief in life after death and in God, or solidify their belief also. We also need to keep helping people that are having trouble with these kinds of experiences. So, people who are having issues with their homes or their places of work, we have to be able to go in there and to try and identify what's going on, to see if there is a human spirit that needs to be prayed for, if there's something environmental that has to be fixed, like faulty wiring that's causing hallucinations or something like that, to see if there's any mental illness that has to be addressed. And finally, of course, to see if there's anything, a spiritual issue, something demonic that has to be addressed by a priest. So there's a lot of reasons that we do have to continue to do paranormal investigation. It should never be done for fun. It should never be done for entertainment. And, again, like I've been saying on and on and on, whenever you do come across a ghost story, or if you're interested in haunted places, your object should be to pray for whatever human spirits are there, to tell their story, to keep the history alive through these stories, but mainly to pray for these spirits that are there, and to pray for protection from the property if there does seem to be something else there. And again, we need to try and get help for any people that might be involved in situations like that. So let's talk first just about EVP and ITC in general, instrumental transcommunication. So trying to use tape recorders or computers or televisions or anything like that to try and communicate with the dead. These are all forbidden by the church, forbidden by the Bible, forbidden by God, and we should not have a part in these at all. So that's very simple, to dismiss any of these things. So you're going to you're not going to use a tape recorder. And again, it's perfectly fine to use a tape recorder to turn it on during an investigation, so you have a record of what's going on, so any sounds that are picked up. that weren't made by one of the investigators and things like that. So that's actually imperative to make a recording of the investigation. During the course of these kinds of recordings, yeah, you might get voices that come up, and those voices can help you to discern, what kind of a spirit is there, usually a human spirit. And, again, total blanket caveat, we don't know what these voices are. They're properly called the voices of unknown origin, because that's what they are. Some investigators think they come from us, like they're thoughts in our own minds that are imprinted on whatever it is, the tape recorder, the digital recorder. I often would wonder if this was the case, because oftentimes it seemed that something I was thinking would end up being spit out by a ghost box, or end up on the tape recorder or something like that. There were several times where I heard my own voice speaking, and some investigators believe that spirits can use our voices to answer our questions. So anyway, we don't need to wonder about that, because we shouldn't be doing that. But at any rate, sometimes you will have voices that come up on your recording of the investigation, and that's fine. And that can help, because I feel like the way that I could distinguish what kinds of spirits were which, if these were spirit voices, were that the spirits would ask for help. The human spirits would ask for help, and nothing else. Nothing else. They would ask for help us, help me. I have thousands of those recordings. Help. And it breaks my heart when I think about it. After a while, I didn't even care about those voices. I would just delete them because they were so uninteresting. And when I think about those, perhaps those were thousands of poor souls that needed my prayers, and I just didn't even think twice about it. So I make it a point to pray for all of those people I might have ignored, if that's in fact what those voices were over all those years. And I encourage you to do the same. If you've been collecting EVP for a little while, a long while, please do the same. Make sure that you keep in your prayers all of those voices that you ignored. And then there were other voices that were angry, vicious voices that would curse, say they were going to kill me. And, presumably these were either damned human spirits. Some exorcists tell us that damned spirits walk the earth until judgment day. So that's a possibility. Or that they're just demonic, satanic, or Satan and his fallen angels. So that would be a way that I could, that helps me to distinguish what might be at issue in a place that I'm investigating now. And that's always been, since I've been investigating, that I feel has helped me to get an idea if are human spirits in the location, or if it's something else. So that can be helpful, but don't try to have a conversation with these voices. It's okay if you pick them up and if it helps you to discern what's happening, but don't try and get more, don't try and start a conversation with them. Don't start asking questions. Anybody who's watched movies about exorcisms or learned about exorcisms in the Catholic Church knows that you never get into dialogue with the demon. Never, ever, ever get into dialogue with the demon. And you know why that is? Because they lie. They lie about everything all the time. And that, my friends, is why we do not use this equipment, because demons lie. I mean, first of all, it's forbidden. It's very dangerous for our soul. It's terrible for us to get sucked into relationships with these things, but they lie. And so, yeah, you might pick up with your tape recorder, you might pick up conversations that you're having with whatever spirits might be in the room. And that spirit might say, oh yeah, I died in this room, or I'm sad because my child was murdered here and I can't leave. You have no idea what these things are or what they're talking about. And again, I've said this before, any human spirit that's somehow tied to the earthly plane is not going to be talking about anything except, please pray for me, help me, pray for me. They're not going to be talking to you about things that happen to them in life, unless they're damned and they're plagued by the memories of the things that they did in life that brought them to this everlasting condition. So, even if you don't, you don't care about what I'm saying and you want to keep on doing your EVP and collecting your tape recordings or your digital recordings at these locations, it's pointless because it's lies. These are probably demonic spirits and they're probably lying to you. you know, and this happens not only with using equipment, it happens with mediums also. The very famous case now of Annabelle, the rag doll that was investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. This spirit that was in the apartment of those nurses claimed to be the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle that had died in the house. First of all, what wonderful God, our Father, who created us and created all human beings, would decide after a little child's death that child should roam the earth in misery. There is no, and I know his ways are not our ways, but there's no way that our God, our loving Heavenly Father, would doom a small child to wandering the earth, haunting for some reason. And I think that's the case for adult humans too, as long as we're talking about that. At any rate, so we've realized that we should not be using anything to have a conversation with the dead. However, there are no tape recorders, no digital tape recorders, no reel-to-reel tape recorders, not trying to use, video feedback or, TV static, radio static, ghost boxes, ghost boxes and the obelisks and all that stuff that try to provide white noise for spirits to communicate with us. We don't want to use any of that. But now some of this equipment can be used like regular recording equipment can be used for good to a good end in paranormal investigation. And we've already talked about how it's okay to use recording equipment in an investigation, but you're not to use it to try and have conversations with the dead. You shouldn't even be doing things like just leaving it on in a room, and saying I'm going to leave this recorder in this room now. And if there's anyone here, you can talk and your voice will be recorded. That is also forbidden. Don't do anything like that. You don't want to do anything where you're actively trying to record voices. Okay. Or images or anything like that. Now, it can be difficult because some of this equipment that that's used to environmentally monitor a location in paranormal investigation has been turned around and used for communication. And the prime example of that is the K2 meter. This is one of 1,000 different electromagnetic field or EM meters that is a legitimate tool to use in ghost hunting. I think I've said before, even on this show, all the investigations that I've done over the years in people's homes, a lot of people say that they're having, seeing apparitions in the house, and it's always in the same room, or, they'll wake up in bed and they'll see the apparitions. And 9 times out of 10, we discover that there's faulty wiring in the house, particularly in the room where they're having they're seeing the apparitions. They're actually hallucinating because of the faulty wiring. And we are only able to detect this possibility because of the use of EM meters like the K2 meter. So, a very valuable tool in discerning what kind of disturbance is going on and getting to the root of it so you can help the people that are involved. But ghost hunting shows have turned the K2 meter, harmless K2 meter and helpful K2 meter, into an occult tool, because it has lights on it. The lights will light up to show the level of magnetic energy in the area. So it starts out with, green, and then goes through, orange and yellow, orange, and it goes up to red. And so these ghost hunting teams have turned this thing into an occult device, because they will tell the spirits, if you're angry, light up this meter to light it up to red. If you're sad, light this meter up to, orange. They'll use other tools for this too, other tools like the REM pod, for example, another tool that lights up when supposedly a presence is near it. They'll turn this into an occult device to try and get it to answer questions, yes and no, or light up to a certain color for a different emotion, of one emotion or another. So that's definitely forbidden to do that kind of thing. The Devil's Toy Box that this episode is named for is a homemade DIY ghost hunting tool that's made by gluing or taping 6 square mirrors together with the mirrors facing inside. And inside the box, you put a recorder and a very small dim light. And you turn the recorder on and just leave it. And when you come back, a few hours or a few days later, you might be surprised to find that it's quiet for a while. And then after a few hours or days, you start to get these really angry voices on the recording. And the theory about the Devil's Toy Box is that a spirit will go into the box to check it out, see what it is. And because of the mirrors inside, there's this long tradition in folklore that mirrors trap spirits, something that I have found seemingly evidence of at different places, which I'll talk about on another episode. We'll talk about mirrors in the paranormal. But the theory is that the spirit goes in to investigate this thing and gets trapped inside because of the mirrors and can't find its way out. And of course, we'll get angry and start saying all these things. Now, I know several people who got really into using the Devil's Toy Box as a paranormal investigation tool, and their physical health seemed to really go downhill afterwards. Also, an obsession with using ghost hunting tools in a couple of the people. Their emotional health and mental health, their personalities seem to change. I think it's an extremely, extremely dangerous proposition to lure some spirit into a box and kind of trap it there. Like it's like a ghost trap, especially if it's a demonic spirit and you're trapping it in a box and then you think something good is going to come out of that. It's just not, my friends. It's not. So the Devil's Toy Box, definitely a no-no. Even in my own home, I over the years I have seen fit to make sure that there's never more than one mirror in any room of our house, because I don't even have a mirror in my bedroom, and I encourage my daughters to not have more than one mirror in their bedroom, because that seems to be able to cause some sort of something. And we'll talk more about that, like I said, when I talk about mirrors and the supernatural and the paranormal and kind of the folklore surrounding all of that. But you may know that, in the olden days when someone passed away in the house, they would immediately cover all of the mirrors because they were afraid that the spirit would get trapped in the house because of the mirrors. But again, for a different day. Okay, we talked about the K2 meters and the EMF meters. EMF meters with no lights on them are totally fine to use in ghost hunting. So our light meters, they can also be helpful. The things like the laser grid. This is something where it's this cool little like pen device that creates a grid of little dots of light on a wall. And ostensibly, if like a spirit walks through and it has any kind of like mass, you can see the change in the lights will change, and maybe you can take a picture or something like that, or you'll know that there's a presence there. And again, this is fine if you're trying to help a family or trying to determine if there's some kind of presence in the room, whether, how much mass a spirit has, I don't know. There are smarter people than me, like Jacques Vallée, who believe that there can be these paraphysical objects that are very different from physical or non-physical objects. So I know the jury's still out on all of that, how much this is actually legit, but that would be fine. to try and determine if there's some kind of a presence by using something like this. But again, not if you're going to start saying like, hey, spirit, turn the laser grid off if you're here, or turn it on if you're here, or turn it off if you don't like it, or something like that. You never want to do anything like that. We talked about the devil's toy box. Using cameras and video cameras is great. Just don't try to coax spirits out. Don't say like, don't you want your picture taken? Why didn't you come out and I'll take your picture with my camera? You don't want to do that. You definitely want to be able to record, anything that's happening in the investigation. However, last but not least, and this is painful subject, the use of human tools in this situation, using mediums, psychics, clairvoyance in paranormal investigation settings is something we should never do. And it's terrible. I've already I talked about this last week when we were talking about, mediums that help find missing children and things like that. And this is forbidden. It's called demonic wisdom. We know that Satan will go to great extremes, including doing seemingly nice things, good things, to get us entrapped in his world and to lead us down that road. And we are absolutely expressly forbidden from doing this. We cannot consult mediums for help with spiritual matters. And, paranormal investigations are spiritual matters, and we cannot employ the help of mediums in these situations. So you cannot bring a medium in with you. I did this 1,000 times. And some of my best friends in my whole life have been mediums, and it's nothing against them. And I'm not even saying that their powers, that their abilities, their gifts are not real. They are absolutely real, but they are not likely from God. They are likely from the devil. And using these gifts, or these abilities, more properly called, is forbidden. Exorcists tell us this, that if you are a medium and you are using these abilities, actively using these abilities, that this is forbidden. It's a test, God gives us a lot of tests where he gives us gifts, he gives us abilities, and he gives us talents, and we are forbidden from them. Even giving us things like beauty, that is such a trap spiritually for us. It's a challenge to us. It's a test to us. And these are gifts to us but they're gifts to us because they're challenges to us to meet, to rise above in our allegiance to God. So we really need to look at them that way, things to rise above. They're gifts because God has given us the opportunity to rise above them, for him to show our faith and to show our trust and our love for him. It's tough, even me, I had this great ability in collecting EVP, and it was thrilling. It was so exciting. And it won me esteem in the eyes of other investigators. Everybody wanted to investigate with me. They wanted to hear how I did it. They wanted to be around me. It made me cool, and when I realized what I was doing a few years ago, I had to put it aside. And do I still feel tempted to turn on a recorder sometimes? I sure do. I've lost so much of my popularity in the last few years, and I think, oh gosh, if I could turn my tape recorder back on or turn my digital recorder back on, I would have so many friends again. And I had to just put all that behind me, like the old story goes, you have to burn the boats. You have to burn the boats so you don't go back. And that's what I did. I literally burned my boat. One day, I think it was in 2021, I got a box and I put in all of my dowsing rods. I put in my ghost boxes, my Shack Hack radios, my Andes box, my oh my gosh, all the boxes, the names, I can't even remember them anymore. There are so many different ones that people invented to try to communicate with spirits, but all these ghost boxes, the dowsing rods, the K2 meters with the lights on them, all that stuff. I put it in a box. I took it out in the alley and I had this giant mallet and I just smashed everything up as much as I could. And, threw it in the bottom of the garbage can in the alley and put a bunch of food garbage on top of it, hoping no one would dig through it. And that was it. I burned my boat so I couldn't go back. Now that's not to say I can turn a tape recorder on today. It's hard. Even sometimes when I record these videos and other videos for stuff that I put on YouTube and such, there'll be voices in the background sometimes. And sometimes they even seem to be interacting with what I'm saying. And I go and I just edit them out. And it's so hard. It's so hard. Because now they're trying to talk to me. And I have to just say, nope, nobody here, wrong number. So I hope that tonight in this episode that you have come to understand a little bit about how, kind of the pastime and not just the hobby of, but also the, very popular pastime of and interest in ghost hunting has changed over the years from a very scientific and essentially harmless pursuit to a very dangerous occult one for so many people. And I hope that you've come to understand why a lot of these ghost hunting tools and also using human tools in paranormal investigation is absolutely forbidden by the church and absolutely dangerous for us to be something to do, for us to do. So I hope that you will take all of this to heart. I hope that you will turn these things over in your mind as the days and the weeks and the months go by. And I hope that in the future, you will realize that there is a lot of good to be done in our efforts at paranormal investigation in helping both the living and the dead. And there are ways of doing that, and there are ways of not doing that. And then I hope in this episode that we have come to understand a little bit better about which of those ways are which. My friends, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. Please join me every week on This Present Darkness as we look at the supernatural from a Catholic perspective. And you can find us on Buzzsprout for the audio version and also on the YouTube channel, Ursula Bielski's World of the Supernatural for the video version. Please like, share, comment, share this everywhere. I'm trying to get my message out, my mission to help people not go down that road I went down, and to bring everybody to trust in our Lord and Savior, Jesus. It's the only thing we need. Thanks for being here tonight. I'll see you next time. And then remember to pray for ghosts. I'm Ursula Bielski.
Thanks for listening to This Present Darkness. The video version of this podcast is available on Ursula Bielski's World of the Supernatural YouTube channel. Be sure to become a subscriber by signing up with Buzzsprout today. And remember to sign up for the World of the Supernatural mailing list at worldofthesupernatural.com for our monthly newsletter and more. And don't forget to support the podcast through Patreon.